another episode of Knight Rider. If you are unfamiliar with this segment, show, I don't know what to call it. This is where we do long form content, right? So I will talk for a while about some topic of this, that, or the other. And we'll just take some time. We're going to get philosophical. We're going to get long form. We're gonna meander a little bit. So if that's your thing, buckle in. If not, well then maybe this isn't for you. So we're gonna talk a little bit about the scouring of our Shire. So if you have been following the channel for any length of time, I've mentioned on and off that I've been reading through Lord of the Rings, like the whole saga, right? The Silmarillion, which probably is my favorite one, by the way. The Hobbit, which I think I only read one time in like high school maybe, and I don't remember liking it at the time. Again, pretty good. This isn't a Lord of the Rings review, but we're gonna talk about it anyway since we're here. And then the Fellowship, the Two Towers, and the Return of the King. And really, the three books are really one book, that they just kind of got broken up into three parts for publishing. And then Lord of the Rings. And I'm at the end of the Lord of the Rings. I have one chapter left when I'm recording this. I have the Grey Havens. I don't know if I'm gonna really nerd out and read the appendices, but I might read some of them. But I'm ready to move on. I'm ready to move back to my normal reading schedule of like military books and a lot of nonfiction, and I got some history lined up maybe, and I got a bunch of stuff that I want to read. So I'm looking forward to getting back to normalcy. But for probably the past almost a year, I've been reading through that. And Tolkien, there's a couple things here. One, Tolkien is very, it's like a fine wine. You can't guzzle it. All right, you got to sip it, and you sip it slowly over time, or like a straight bourbon or something. You sip it slowly over time. You don't just guzzle it. One that would not enjoy the quality of what it is that you're consuming, right? You're like, oh well, I can do a shot of bourbon, Dylan, and I would say, yeah, you physically can do that, but that's stupid, right? Bourbon is meant to be drunk neat and slowly, right? You pour some in a glass, and then you sip it for over an extended amount of time. You don't just guzzle it. Again, just destroys the purpose of the bourbon, right? Same thing with a fine wine, right? You don't guzzle it. You pour a glass, and you sip it through the course of your dinner. Maybe you have a second glass because you really like it. But again, then you sip that over the course of after dinner. And Tolkien is very much like that. Like, I can't read a ton and just like crank through it, right? It's not like an exciting adrenaline-filled novel like an Ender's Game or a Red Rising, or just like these kind of like exciting, let's go, like kind of novel. It's not like that. It's a slow, enjoyable walk. I hate walks, so that analogy doesn't work for me personally, but might land on you. And I think that's really some of the value in it in Lord of the Rings and the whole saga. The Silmarillion is probably my favorite work. It's definitely the most. I've said this before, but it's the most beautifully sad novel I've ever read. I don't even know if novel is maybe myth might be the best word to describe it. So I'm a big fan of Lord of the Rings, and if it didn't take me a whole year to get through it, maybe I'd read it more often. But I am at this point, like I said, or I think I said this, right at I just finished the Scouring of the Shire, which is the second to last chapter in Lord of the Rings. And there's only one chapter left. So spoiler alerts ahead here if you're somehow behind the curve on this. But in the book, not in the movie, there's a lot that happens after the ring is destroyed in the book. So the ring gets destroyed, and then there's a significant amount, like, I don't know, 80, 100 pages of falling action, right? And it's not really falling action, though. it's further like myth establishment, character development. In my opinion, I think some of the best parts in the book happen after the ring is destroyed. Um, and a lot of that goes back to, again, you're reading this myth, this cultural's the wrong word, but this myth, and I really enjoy that. I think it's really good. It's really enjoyable. You get a understanding of the grandioseness of what's just occurred. You get an understanding of the importance and the honor and the glory and the victory. And Tolkien did a great job. So one of the things that happens in the book is the scouring of the Shire. So, real quick, for those, just to catch everyone up here, the hobbits, Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin, are from this place called the Shire in the book, right? Which he borrows from a British term. And that's where they live. It's where they grew up. And it's this very rural, idyllic place where they live. And there's lots of trees, and they care about gardens, and they just have a little life, and they smoke their pipe a little bit, and they drink some good beer, and generally hang out, right? Eat lots of good food. And it's just kind of there's no real government structure. It's just kind of an idyllic living area. So they go off on this big journey. They destroy the ring. All of them they change. There's character arc, right? They all go through significant suffering and pain and glory, and they're changed people. And at the end of the book, they come back to the Shire, and they themselves have changed, right? Frodo has carried the ring and destroyed the ring. Sam has journeyed with Frodo and carried Frodo and carried the ring, I suppose, and really changed, and he's tougher, right? They've become more of who they are. Merry helped slay the Lord of the Nazgul, right? And rode in a great cavalry charge in the fields of Pelennor. Pippin became a knight of Gondor and saved Faramir from absolute death. They've gone through significant life-altering things, and they're just different people, right? They've faced grave dangers. They've faced absolute terror and just grave, important, big events. And so they come back home, and their home has also changed. It has been corrupted by evil men, right? So hobbits are only 2-3 feet short, whatever. And there's been some men who've moved in and bullied people, and there's rules now about how much firewood you can burn and how much food you can eat, and there are people who come around to collect your food for redistribution, right? It's a pretty good rag on communism. There's a bunch more police officers now. There was maybe one before, but he kind of wandered around just to check on people and explore. He didn't really do any policing because it wasn't needed. But now there are all these rules and laws and things you can't do, and you have to refer to the person who's in charge as the chief, because if you call him by his name, then that you're going to find out, and they're going to put you in prison. Anytime you break one of the ever-expanding list of rules, you get put in prison, and it's changed. And so the hobbits come back, and the four that we just talked about, and they know some of these other hobbits, and hey, what are you doing? And they're well, that's against the rules. You can't do that. And because they are changed people, right? They just laugh. They're just yeah, we're not going to do that. I'll burn whatever firewood I want. Thanks. I don't really care. And they are just generally kind of carefree about a lot of the rules and regulations and things they're supposed to do. And it comes to a head where they end up fighting this battle. It's a smaller battle, but it's a battle to drive out the evil men that have corrupted their Shire and taken over and established all these rules about what you can and can't do. And they win the battle, and they kick people out. But their home has been corrupted and destroyed, right? All these trees, there's this huge tree that they had that they really liked, has been cut down, right? One of the old mills has been torn down and put up this ugly brick building that puts out black smoke all the time. There was like rows of like chestnut trees that have all been ripped down. Like there's damage that has been done to the Shire that will take a lifetime to replace, right? You just can't replace these trees or these gardens or these things, right? So it's been corrupted. It's been destroyed. And again, they win the battle and they set the path to start healing things, but it takes time. And it's this, again, beautifully sad thing. And it's probably my favorite part of the book. It's probably my favorite part of the book. And it's my favorite part of the book primarily for the character change, for the fact that these guys have faced so much danger and suffering and dismay that they come back to this and it's small potatoes. It's small potatoes to them. They cut right through it like a knife through butter. They rally all the hobbits. They finish the battle. They're not concerned. They're not worried. You know, they all wear chainmail now and carry swords, right? Because they're just used to doing that. That's just how they do. And because they dealt with so much bigger issues before, dealing with this small issue isn't a big deal. Who cares, right? Like they're not ever intimidated. They're horrified, but they're not intimidated by their opponents because they faced much worse and much graver, right? And so that's why it's my favorite part, because it shows that change. But reading through it this time, I think I was saddened or struck by the scouring of our Shire, because the thing that made the quick turnaround so possible from moving it from this place where there's all these rules about how much firewood you can burn. You can't do that. That's against the rules. The thing that made it go from that to back to free Hobbiton, shall we say, was that there was a will at large in the people to not live like that. There was a will at large with all the hobbits to not live like that. No one really liked the rules, but you kind of had to follow it. And it made me think of stuff like COVID, which was only 4 years ago, right? It made me think of stuff just of how we as a society perceive things or think through things. I was talking to a friend of mine who's 19 the other day, and was explaining to him about the laws regarding rifles and like an AR. And he was like, "Yeah, but like, whose name does it have to be in?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about? Like, it doesn't have to be in anyone's name." "Yeah, but like, you gotta like register it somehow, don't you?" And I'm like, "No, man, no." You don't. Like, why would you have to do that? And I was going on about how everyone who registers guns are therefore confiscated, and et cetera, and it was a big deal. And so I ranted at him and reamed him out for like 5-10 minutes, whatever. But here was this guy who his brain was so set on like, but we have to tell the government about this though, right? Like, you can't just do that. I mean, let's be reasonable, right? And he's a good guy and he's young and whatever. I'm making fun of him, but he's a friend of mine. And my point being, like, his brain was so set on it, right? And it made me think about the scouring of our Shire. And the scouring of our Shire isn't just in the physical landscape, right? It's in people's souls. And I think that's the most sad part. That's the most frustrating part. People have this default understanding, belief, scouring, that there's that loss of that independent spirit, right? You couldn't raise up hobbits in the same way. And there's a lot of people out there who aren't like this, so let's be clear about that. You, if you're watching this. but there's not this widespread understanding or feeling, um, yearning, desire, base disposition towards freedom or liberty or distaste for the rules, right? Instead, when COVID happened, by and large, everybody just kind of went along with it, you know. Now, there were definitely some people, and there were some people who came around later to be like, wait a second, maybe turning off the economy and forcibly injecting people with experimental drugs is a bad idea, right? But by and large, everyone just kind of went along with it, and I think that's not that it's hopeless, because I don't believe that for a second. But I think that's the scouring of our Shire. That's what we have to root out and replace. That's what we need to fix and change. Those are our sacred trees that have been ripped out that take a lifetime to replace. Right? That's it. It's that spirit. It's that independent American frontier spirit. Is what built the nation. It's what the country was founded on. I am going to go off into the wilderness and I'm going to figure it out. You know, my son laments to me sometimes that there's no more wilderness for him to explore, and it's sad. I appreciate his lamenting about that, right? But he's like, is all the property like owned by someone? And I'm like, well, yeah, buddy. I mean, yeah. And he's like sad that there's no just wild wilderness that he can just go do whatever in, right? And I appreciate that. Um, so that's the kind of spirit that I think we need to restore, right? We have grown up so long. I saw a tweet one time, and it was like, if the government started a program that taught 1 year olds or 2 year olds how to walk, 1 year olds, not 2 year olds, it's way too late, 1 year olds how to walk, and then you had that program for a couple years, and then a couple of years later you tried to cancel that program, everyone would be like, well, how's everyone supposed to learn to walk then? Like, this is ridiculous. You don't want people walking, and and be upset that you want to cancel the program, right? Even though it's walking, in case you don't know, it's just something that kids do, right? It's just something, it's part of the natural development of growth. They're going to start walking one way or another. Okay? So it doesn't require a special government program. But I thought, man, that's really accurate. Like that really, everyone just like, we've been trained to have this default setting towards government authority and government interference in life, and we've been taught our whole lives that you can't do it, or it won't work, or something, if there isn't a governmental authority there to implement it, control it, monitor it, watch you, etc. When I was a kid, um, I was always told that if you have a problem with a bully or whatever, you need to, and maybe you were told this too, if you're my age or younger, you need to tell the teacher, right? That's what you were told. You weren't told, go solve it, right? If a bully is being a bully to you, punch him in the nose as hard as you can. You weren't told that. I tell my kids that. You weren't told that, right? You were told that you should go tell the teacher. Why? Well, you were told that because we were all being trained at the time. None of us realized it because, you're like 8 or whatever. You're being trained that you need to go to this third-party authority who will then mediate justice between you, right? You can't solve your own problems in life. That's what you were being taught. Subliminally? Subconsciously? I don't know what the word is I'm looking for there. But, you can't just have kids solving their own problems. Imagine the mayhem. Of course, again, This is a good example about the walking thing, right? Because if you rolled back the clock to my parents' generation, well, that's absolutely what they did, right? My parents, the boomers, right? When they were kids, if there was a problem, they figured it out. And if they didn't, then it was still going to be a problem. And that was it. That there was no like running and telling someone and being a tattletale, right? There was no, oh, well, you need to rely upon the government to fix all of your problems. They didn't even have a Department of Education when my parents went to school, you know? But now, again, you talk about removing the Department of Education, everyone wants to freak out, right? Our Shire has been scoured. And so I think about that. Right, I think about all the endless list of rules. I both was laughing and was like, oh man, this is too accurate about the thing in the Shire where there's just an endless list of rules about what you can and can't do and can and can't say and how much firewood you can burn and how much food you can eat and what kinds of food you can eat and you know who you have to give your tobacco leaf to and I just thought, man, I live in a society that's so overregulated. Like it's so bad. I think the average American, and now I read this. So I can't even remember to tell you where. So take this with a big grain of salt here, okay? But the average American commits something like 1 to 3 felonies a day, not because everyone is a felonious, horrible person, but because there are that many laws with that many felonies in them that no one can even track, right? I mean, think about this for a second. We have a profession in our society called lawyers, right? Or attorneys, right? Or if you're from the South, you guys say it weird. It's like lawyer, or I don't know how you say it. It's really weird. I can't repronounce it, honest to God. Every time someone from the South says the word, I'm like, how do you move your tongue to say that? Anyway, and so we have this profession, and this profession is there to help guide you through the law. Why? Because the law is so incredibly complicated that unless you spend years studying a very narrow band and a very specific part of it, you can't figure it out. Think about that for a second. What does that mean for the average person? What that means for the average person is there are so many rules that are hidden or beyond their understanding that they are incapable of following them unless they consult professionals. My first question is, well, what good is the law then? If the average person, and I'm not talking about someone who's really stupid, I'm just talking about the average human being, the person who wants to follow the law even, can't, because it's so convoluted and complicated, and there's case law, and then there's this law was made in this year, but then a couple years later this law was made, but then this law was made that actually changes those two, but then there was a court decision after that that actually affected that law. I mean, that's the society we live in. It's so litigious. We are one of the most litigious societies in the human history ever, by far. The Romans were litigious, but we blow them out of the water. So I don't know who would even come close. We're so, I want to say legalized, but that's not the right word. We're so swamped in laws. I mean, just the tax code in this country, it's something like 68, 48, somewhere in there, 1,000 pages. That's just the tax code. Forget like business law or criminal law or property law or, you know, bird. How about you and I go toe to toe on bird law and see who comes out on top? Some of you will get that, some of you won't. That's fine. You know, but like there's so much that at this point, I mean, like, again, you couldn't get through it if you wanted to, right? You need like years of study, maybe not years, but you need lots of study and professional help in order to navigate this. That's the scouring of our Shire. That's the scouring of our Shire. It's so overregulated. That's what I was looking for earlier. It's overregulated, and that doesn't even seem to do it justice, right? because there are so many things that are just that there to just oppressively crush your free spirit and your will to live. And I'm not saying we shouldn't live in a society without laws. I'm not an anarchist, not by a long shot. But again, when there's so much that you've crushed, you are this oppressive weight crushing the human spirit and the American spirit. What's the point anymore? I mean, imagine, hauling out Noah Webster, signer of the Declaration or signer of the Constitution, Merriam-Webster dictionary. It's that Noah Webster. Okay, love Jesus, as far as I can tell. Imagine hauling out Noah Webster and explaining to him case laws, just that concept. It's like, well, so, I know that, you said we can say whatever we want, but there, when things get icky or there's some sicknesses, you can't say these things here on these platforms. You can't actually open your business and serve people food because there was a cough. So some people went to prison, and then the government told us we all had to get injected with something that we didn't know what was what. So, like, just imagine that. Actually, I know that you guys got mad about the taxes thing, but, we pay about somewhere between 30 to 50% in our income in taxes through various means. There's a lot of taxes. Like, just, that's a whole nother, taxes is a whole other issue we're not going to get into right now. But you just think about that, right? Think about trying to explain to these free men, these men of the Shire, the scouring that has been done in their name too. Ooh, that stings, right? But, and I understand societies grow, things get more complicated, whatever, but we've lost our way. And that happens to all late stage empires. That's how they get to be late stage empires. They lose their way, and then at some point there's a crash, economically, often, militarily, often, like getting conquered by enemies, right? Like Aurora, Colorado, for example, because people, their minds, their souls have been so scoured that they have reached this point where they think it's normal. We think it's normal. Well, of course you have to put tabs on your vehicle because you got to pay the government a tax every year to drive your vehicle. I mean, that's just, what, you got expired tabs? What kind of, horrible, irresponsible lout are you to not pay the government every year to be allowed to drive the vehicle that you paid tax on when you bought with the money that you earned, which you were taxed on? Sir, be a good citizen, right? Like that's the default line of thinking. So I would invite you to think about how our Shire has been scoured, right? And two closing thoughts here. One is you can just despair. It's so over. Oh my God, Dylan's right. We're destroyed, And I just was born in the wrong century. I think I was born in the wrong century a lot. So I'm right there with you, bro. And you can despair, and I don't think that's the appropriate response. Okay. The other thing you can do is you can have hope, right? The Shire in the story was set towards restoration. It's going to take time. It's going to take work, but it was set towards restoration. And I think it's no different here. Look, there's gonna be an after, right? I won't be alive to read it, but I would love to read history on this era in about 100, 200 years from now, right? But what's coming after? What comes after all the rules and the tyrannies and the super complicated structures? When that all reaches a breaking point and just is crushed under its own inertia, what then? What comes after? how are you preparing to build the world that you won't see? Now, you can be sad about that and be like, well, it's not fair, I won't get to see it, whatever. But that's not my point. My point is there's going to come something after. There always does. There always will. That or Jesus will come back and it'll all wrap up anyway. But what are you doing to invest in the after? Right? I think about that a lot, especially with parenting. I won't, live to see what comes after, likely. Maybe, but likely not. But how am I investing in and setting the table so that my kids will be in a place where they can effectively influence the after, and they can be a part of the restoration of the Shire, right? How am I getting all the physical and mental tools prepared for them so that they are equipped to restore the Shire? And I think about that. I think about that a lot. I think if my life only sets the stage for the people who come after me to restore the Shire, and they say, oh, thank God that these people had some foresight and helped us get ready so that we could do this when the time was ripe, I'll take that, right? I'll take that. I'd love to restore the Shire sooner, right? But if I don't live to see that, I want to instill that American spirit in my friends and my kids and everyone else, and you. If you don't have it, I'm sure you do because you're watching this, and we're 32 minutes in here, boys, so if you're still hanging around, kudos. And I want to restore the Shire. So I think that's what I would encourage you with, is think about that. How are you investing in the future restoration of the Shire right now? And that looks to me like things like doing your dry fire and reading and talking to people, and if you have kids, helping disciple your kids with a firm belief in liberty, and that you don't need everyone to solve problems, right? Like, so for example, my kids have a problem or whatever, I will tell them a lot, figure it out. They're like, but Dad, I'll need your help. And I'll just say, no, you don't. Figure it out. One, I can't help you right now. I'm doing this other thing. But two, I know that you're going to struggle with it. And that's okay, right? Just figure it out. Because the thing that I care most about isn't necessarily if they get to do the thing, right? They actually figure the thing out. I don't really care about that too much. What I care about is them learning to struggle through something and figure it out. That's what I care about. That's what I care about. Be a problem solver. Jesus will return. The Shire is going to be restored one way or another. I hope that you get to drive towards the restoration and not get crushed by the despair of the Scouring. Do brave deeds. Amen.